This tank survived a nuclear blast. You see, in October 1953, the British conducted a test in South Australia where a 9.1 kiloton nuclear device was detonated just 500 yards away from a British-built Centurion tank, with the Army registration number 169041. The explosive yield on this device was just under half the power of the Fat Man bomb dropped on Nagasaki in 1945. With the very real threat of nuclear war between the West and the Soviets, the test was intended to study the effects of nuclear weapons on the Centurion, bearing in mind that this tank was designed in World War II and was never intended to withstand a nuclear blast. The tank was loaded with ammunition, its fuel tanks were filled, the engine was left running, and the experiment began. A visual inspection upon returning to the tank showed that the blast had moved the 50-ton Centurion backwards roughly 5 feet. Its side skirts had been blown completely off and were found roughly 200 yards away, and its lights and periscopes were heavily sandblasted. They also found that the engine wasn't running, but only because it had run out of fuel. Had the tank been crewed during the experiment, they weren't expected to have survived, as the shockwave alone would have been fatal, but ultimately, the tank had survived the test. Tank 169041 became known as the Atomic Tank. It remained in service and even saw use in the Vietnam War. The tank survived the test of time and still remains in Australia. It's currently located at the Robertson Barracks in Palmerston, Northern Territory.